you're okay. You have nothing to prove to an elder in a church or to a teacher or to a parent or to someone who just doesn't see the world as you see the world.
Hi, I'm Gracie Mercedes, and welcome back to Not Blank Enough, a podcast about everyday insecurities and triumphs. Today, I'm chatting with Lazarus Lynch, aka the son of a Southern chef. The Black, queer, multi-hyphenate artist, cook, actor, and writer talks about his upbringing in Queens, New York, growing up in the church, what inspired him to write his cookbook, coming out, and so much more. Plus, he performs a beautiful poem inspired by our conversation that we titled Not Man Enough. Welcome to Not Blank Enough. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Gracie. Thank you.
I want to tell the audience that I literally just met you days ago and instantly fell in love. I was with our friend, Matthew Law, who was actually our second guest on this podcast. So if anyone wants to go back to episode 2, they can learn more about Matthew. And he was calling you to wish you a happy birthday. And we FaceTimed you, and I met you over FaceTime, and I was instantly drawn to you. And I was like, I don't know if it's because he's a Pisces like I am, or because he's from New York like I am, but I'm obsessed.
All of that.
Yeah, all of those things. And so then I was like, oh my God. And then literally the next day I had a meeting with a production company for this podcast, and we were talking about getting new guests. And I was like, oh my God, I have to ask him. I have to askAz. So thank you for doing this.
No, thank you for inviting me. And it's so crazy because, I had seen some of the work that you and Matthew had done. Shout out to Matthew Law. He's our rock star friend. And then I had only been following you for like 2 days before my birthday. So it was just like really, really good timing. And I was like, oh my God, I just started following you. And then we just connected. So all things meant to be, right? Just
I
like
love it.
how it happened. Yeah.
I love it. You are also one of the first people who kind of came to me with what your blank is. Because a lot of times I just have these very casual conversations with people and their blank comes up within the talking because I make everyone kind of tell me about their life story, their upbringing, and people's blanks, shift throughout their lives. But you were very much ready to talk about a certain blank that we will get to. But first, I want to know about your upbringing, where you're from, what your childhood was like, and all that stuff.
Well, I was born and raised in New York City, Jamaica, New York. Woo, woo. I lived here all of my life. Actually, the very place I'm here now recording is the same place I grew up in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the same apartment, all of it. So there's a lot of memories in the walls and the floors, and I still listen to that and feel that every day. Mom was from Guyana. She grew up in a convent. She was raised by nuns. Mom grew up there. And then when she was 13 years old, she moved to London with her mom, who was a practicing nurse. And her mom felt it was better for her to live there and, find education and have a better life. So Mom and her sister moved to London. Then when mom was 26, 13 years later, she moved to New York City. So I'll cut there and just talk about Dad for a second. So Dad was born in a small city called Bessemer, Alabama. And he grew up there till he was 6.
So the South, yeah. Till he was 6.
South.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he moved to New York City with his family. So my dad was a New Yorker, from the time he was 6 up until, he was a New Yorker. So he and Mom were neighbors and eventually started dating. And my mother always tells this story. She's like, I couldn't understand a word your father said when we met because he had such a different accent and way of speaking. And, her ears were still sort of like morphing to the American sound, whatever that means. And so they started dating. They fell in love, had me and my 4 brothers and sisters. So I was one of 5. So my dad's first relationship, he had his first son, who he named after him, Ray. Ray is basically almost 20 years older than me.
Yep. My family's like that too. I'm the oldest of, there's 4 of us, but I am like the difference between me and my baby sister, who just turned 21, is 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you get it.
So I get it.
And then there was my oldest brother and then my older sister. and then me, and then my younger sister. And church was pretty much all of our lives outside of school, dance class, art class, music. It was church.
So you were into artsy stuff at a young age then?
I was. I always say that arts was sort of my safe haven. It was the place that I felt most myself. I felt like I had a voice there. I felt like there was something I was good at. The other thing about my childhood was that dad worked very crazy hours. So he owned a retail store. He owned, which is like men's fashion. And then he owned a 99-cent store. And then he was also installing carpet.
Wow.
And he named his business after me. It was called Lazarus Carpet. And I would go with him on jobs, get in this big truck, go with him on jobs and help him lay down the padding when I was probably like 12 years old. Right. Yeah. And like help him put the nail guns into the walls. I mean, all these things. And so my dad was like a handyman. He was very hands-on. He loved building things.
Did you like doing that stuff, or did it feel like not your thing?
I just loved going into people's homes, honestly, as a kid, and just kind of like, where's the bathroom? Looking around the bathroom, just kind of like, one time I actually went to someone's kitchen and I was like looking through their fridge, and the person caught me and was like, you can't, be in here. So I just like the adventure of it. I didn't like the manual labor aspect of that. Mm-hmm. So pretty much at home, it was mom. Mom was doing the dishes. Mom was doing the laundry. Mom was cleaning the house, cooking, etc., doing the homework. So the weekends was pretty much the time that I got to spend a lot of time with dad. And when I was about 12 years old, my dad closed down the carpet business. He closed down the retail business. And he said, I'm going to own a restaurant. That's what I want to do. So it was totally different from anything he'd ever done before. The restaurant business, as people may know or not know, is a very tough business.
Especially in New York.
Especially in New York. I mean, it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
But he was like, I want to do soul food. And so my dad had no professional training, both in being an entrepreneur or being a chef, but he just learned how to be resourceful. And I feel like that's a Black thing. You just kind of learn how to get by. You learn how to figure things out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how old are you when this happened?
I always say I'm 11 or 12. So I was probably right on that cusp of 11, 12. Yeah.
And were you like excited about the restaurant stuff, or was that like, yeah, look at the smile on your face?
I was so excited. Because I was like, oh my God, like my dad's going to have a place where people are going to like know his food, and they're going to go in there and there's going to be all this stuff. I mean, I had a child's imagination around like what it meant to be in a restaurant. I just knew restaurants from going out to eat with my family. So I was like, dad's going to have one of those. Like I was thinking about the Chinese buffet, dad's going to have that.
Right.
Before that though, Gracie, I was very into music and painting and art. And so I thought I was going to be an artist, and I thought I was going to be an animation designer. And I watched tons of Disney and Pixar movies. And I was like, I'm going to create all of that. And that's what I want to do. I'm going to be an animator.
So you were a creative kid from a young age. What was that like at school? Like, what was your school environment like?
School was challenging. Mm-hmm. I was a naughty, naughty kid, in the words of my family in London. Very naughty. I was very, very naughty. I was just very rambunctious. I had a lot of energy and I didn't know how to channel it. I went to school in a place called Forest Hills. So Forest Hills is like 5 miles away from where I live, or where I grew up and lived. But that community was known to have better schools. And it was better schools because it had arts programs and, the teaching was solid. So at a very young age, I started to sort of look down on my community and the schools that were in my community, and therefore the kids that were in my community, because I felt like this was a less than neighborhood. This was a less than school.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you internalize that.
I should explain to the audience, because I also grew up in New York City. Like, so many schools in New York are such crap. Like, I went to Catholic school my whole life because the public school system wasn't great. And I grew up in Brooklyn mostly, and then Manhattan. And yeah, there were so many bad schools that we were zoned for. And so my mom would always put me in Catholic school. And so I totally get that. But I want to unpack that a little bit, because that's really interesting. So you're in one neighborhood, but the schools there are not great. So you're going to Forest Hills where the schools are better. And now you're kind of looking down on your neighborhood, or looking down at the kids in your neighborhood. What was that like?
internally, like in the schools, I battled a lot with feeling othered because there were mostly white kids and, all different types of kids. I mean, New York City and Queens specifically, which is like hugely diverse. But I was always like one of the 12 Black kids in the school. And so as a kid, even the teachers and the students would be like, oh, you're so-and-so's cousin. And I'm like, I'm not Marcus's cousin. I'm not
just because we're Black,
Day-Day's,
we're related.
just because we're Black. So there was a lot of that. And then there was also like, because I'm from Jamaica, Queens, so people would be like, wait, you're from Jamaica?
Oh, Jesus. I'm like, no, different Jamaica. Like,
no, it's a different Jamaica.
Yeah. What was your blank back then? Did you have one? Was there something you were feeling you were missing?
Oh, I just didn't know how to be a kid, Gracie. And the reason I say that is because I grew up in church. So, and I mean Pentecostal, apostolic denomination specifically, Black church. So that looked like, you just did what you were told. There was very little space for curiosity outside of the realm of, does this please God? So if this did not please God, like explicitly, right? If it was a film, if it was a show, if it was an activity, it just wasn't okay. So I was that child who, and it's so crazy looking back, I would take my Bible to school. I remember taking my massive, my King James Version Holy Bible, riding it on the yellow school bus and reading the Bible. Like that was
just because, not because you were like told to?
Not because I was told to, but just because I didn't know another way to relate to these other kids. So for me, it was safe. It was protective to sort of just go to what I know. So I know that I can feel safe and I can feel unbothered if I just read this Bible. The other kids wouldn't want to talk to me. So there was a lot of like not knowing how to have fun, not knowing how to play.
Not like childlike enough.
Not like childlike enough.
Yeah. I can relate to that a little bit. I think it's a similar thing where my mom was a single mom until I was about 12 or 13 when she met my stepfather, who she's still married to. But she worked a ton. And when I was very young, I would stay with my grandmother after school or my aunt. And then as I got older, it was like after school programs or same thing, like a friend's house. I very much took on an adult persona. Now I'm learning in therapy. It's called parentification, that I was parentified.
Parentified.
Like, okay. Because then my mom had like my siblings and I was so much older than them. So I was taking care of them when she was working and stuff like that. And so there is this thing, and I don't think she put it on me or even knew what she was doing, because she was just trying to survive and trying to get me to go to school. But I would put all this pressure on myself. Like I was very much like, I came home from school in my little Catholic school uniform and I would immediately do my homework. And my mom would be like, can you just like change and relax and eat something first? And I'm like, no, I have to get my homework done. There was this thing that I always felt, and I was always like kind of a nerd and really into school and I couldn't get in trouble and all that stuff. So I totally relate to that, of feeling like not like childlike enough. Like I never felt carefree when I was a kid.
Yes, I think carefree is the right word. Just like I don't have to be responsible today. Like always feeling the burden of feeling responsible either for someone else's reputation or how someone perceives you or that factor. But there was a turning point.
Okay.
And that turning point happened on the school buses. So at first it was kind of like this quiet, shy kind of kid. And then I realized that, okay, the other boys on the school bus who are also Black and from my neighborhood, like they seem to be the cool kids. And the way to be a cool kid is to act out on the bus. So, so we started acting out, Gracie, on the school bus. And there were.
What did you do?
We did a lot of things. I mean, from fights to snatching out people's homework and throwing it out the window.
Oh my God.
To also going into the front of the bus when the bus driver was getting off of the bus and pretending that I was the driver and starting the engine. Yeah.
Wow.
Elementary school was rough up until the 5th grade. I mean, I was suspended a couple times. I was just I was just rambunctious. I had a lot of energy. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until the 5th grade that I had a teacher named Mrs. Mincer who said, Laz has got a lot of talent. He just needs the focus and the discipline to like narrow that energy. And that's what changed. That's what changed for me. That 5th grade teacher, who I still, by the way, keep in touch with.
Oh, that's beautiful. I was just going to say that that's such a beautiful thing to hear. And I feel like everyone has that one teacher who made them feel special or feel like they can do something they didn't think they can do, and like how magical that is, and how we really need to pay teachers more, but that's a whole nother topic.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Preach.
So, okay. So that was your turning point. And so is that now where you kind of lean into the arts?
That's when I started paying attention to that. I mean, I've always been into it. And it was interesting, just like the thread of figures in my life who were very instrumental. So even from church, it was like the choir director, was a woman. The people that sort of nurtured and raised me were women. The teacher who sort of rescued, I don't like to use that word, but just sort of identified that part of me that needed to be seen and needed a voice.
She saw something in you.
She saw something. And then I had 2 other dance teachers and art teachers on the weekends who were also women. So I also see this pattern of very strong women figures in my life who are leading me, calling me into, my art and my gifts. So at that point I was like, okay, I'm dancing a lot. I'm learning choreography, doing a few plays, but I was still drumming and I was still singing in church and being a part of the choirs. But it wasn't until like junior high school that I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And, in New York City, there's options like you can go to performing arts high schools. So I auditioned everywhere, but food was calling me. And I think it's because my dad had the restaurant. And so I was like, I really feel like I want to be a chef, which was a total pivot from anything I'd ever considered before.
Right. And so then tell me about what happened next. Like, how did you get into that world?
It started with a friend from church, whose name is Ashley, who's still one of my closest friends today. She went to the high school and she was telling me about different things they were doing at school. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. What is the school? So she was like, it's called Food and Finance High School. It's in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, New York. There were one of 6 different schools in that building. I was like, I think I want to go to that high school. And so it was a lottery system and I applied and got in. And so the process was like, okay, here's 9th grade. You're in high school. You're going to be spending half of the day learning about food, culinary, safety, sanitation, knife skills, etc. And then the other half of your day, you're going to spend in your core classes. So it was a traditional high school in the sense that we'd had all of our, standard classes, but then we did baking and then we did pastry and then we did culinary. So I mean, I think about my high school experience as a very defining moment that changed a lot of things for me. But prior to that time, and even during that time, there was still a lot of not enoughness. There was still a lot of feeling.
What were those?
Like, okay,
what were those not enoughs?
Not Black enough. This whole community of going to school with, pretty much all kids that were not Black, pretty much elementary through junior high school, to finally being in a predominantly Black, Latino, Latinx high school, few Native Americans, was a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
For me. So I was the kind of kid that was just like, first of all, like I didn't cuss. So I wasn't cussing.
Do you cuss now? Because I curse all the time. I don't want to offend you.
We curse.
Okay.
All the motherfucking time.
Okay.
Now, it's very interesting. We'll come back to that. But at the time, no, there were so many, I think, leashes on me still. I just didn't feel like I could express because expressing was sinning.
It's so interesting because I've interviewed quite a few Black people at this point for the show, and almost every one of them have said they haven't felt Black enough at some point, which is crazy because, the world is constantly telling us we're Black and putting us in certain boxes and places because of it. But then there's the other side of it where if you like certain things, that's not considered Black. If you speak a certain way, that's not considered Black. If you blah, 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 that's not. And it's just like, where did we come up with this stuff? And why do we have these thoughts of what like, we're not a monolith. Like, Black people are not a monolith. Latinx people are not a monolith. White people are not a monolith. Stop making these assumptions that because you are a certain thing, you need to be a certain way. So I just find that so fascinating. I'm like, oh, here's another person saying they felt they weren't Black enough at some point in their life.
Well, it's also that we internalize these messages, I think, as Black people, that we know we are unique and we know that we are Black, but we don't always step into the nuance of what that feels like and how that's lived every day. Because the lived experience of Blackness is a very different one than the sort of conversational, we are Black people, we are one, it's different in a lived environment. And especially as a child, when I had teachers who said things like, don't take your shirt and tie it around your waist, like the sleeves, don't do that and tie it around your waist because that's what faggots do. I actually had a teacher tell me that.
Jesus Christ.
I had another teacher say that my sister had no talent.
Wow.
A white lady say that to me as a child. What starts to happen is that over time, we as Black people, we begin to internalize those oppressive messages that enforce this kind of, we're not good enough. And then we compare that to other people and then we start to repeat those back. We regurgitate basically that horror story onto other Black people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Isn't that interesting? The power of teachers though, too. Like on one side, they can be so inspirational and really propel you into greatness. On the other side, they can say things that stick with you forever and just like,
oh my gosh,
eat you up.
Yes.
Okay, so now you're in this high school, you're learning how to cook and do all the culinary things. And then what happens after high school?
So after high school, I was like, I don't know what to do because this high school was amazing. Yet I felt so fulfilled in that experience that I was like, I don't know if I want to spend another 4 years in a culinary school. I don't know where I want to be. And I'll just backtrack and say, like, high school is very defining. I went abroad. I lived in China for 3 months and did all these crazy things and had all these amazing experiences. And then I felt like, okay, what do I do now? I decided I was going to go to Buffalo State College, and that was in Buffalo, New York. And I was like, I want to study way up there, way cold up there. And I was like, I'm just going to do a liberal arts kind of education, and started in that. And then I was like, maybe I want to be a dietitian, nutritionist. I can still sort of incorporate the food part, and did that for 2 years and hated it. I was like, biochem, that's not my thing at all. And then I landed in the theater department and I was conflicted because I couldn't take all of the classes. There were overlaps between those classes and some of the dietetic classes that I was still part of that were still on my schedule, and I couldn't make the switch. But I was able to sort of talk to the dean or whatever, and I was like, can we make something work? And ended up going abroad with the theater department. I was the only non-theater major to go study abroad in Rwanda. And we were doing, we were performing and learning about the genocide that happened in 94. And, we were doing all of this sort of like reconciliation through theater. So it was a lot of like, perform all these scenes of being attacked. And that was an amazing experience. And I got back and I was like, okay, I'm a sophomore now. I really feel like I need to switch majors, and still felt very conflicted about pursuing theater because theater was scary to me. It was a place that it felt too vulnerable. And so I was like, I don't want to do that. So instead I ended up in media production, and I was taking journalism classes and film classes.
We have a parallel life there. I'll
really
tell you about it. I do think a lot of people who come from immigrant homes or homes where, not privileged homes, that it's hard for us to pursue arts because it feels, at least I'll speak for myself, it feels indulgent almost. Like, no, you need to get a real job and you need to work hard and make money and make your parents proud because they work so hard and they came here. My parents are both from Dominican Republic, so they came here as immigrants and blah, 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 blah. And so I always wanted to be an actor. I took a bunch of acting classes in college, even though I went to school for broadcast journalism, thought I was going to be a reporter, worked in production, all this stuff. And then finally at like 27, moved to LA to be an actor. Didn't really start pursuing acting, getting into classes and stuff until I was 30, which is ancient for Hollywood.
Oh my God. But look at you now.
But look at me now. Still trying to make it. No, but doing it. But yeah, but I think I think that's a similar thing that a lot of us artists struggle and go through.
You kind of hit a point where you're like, I can sort of start checking these boxes and do what everyone says. But then at some point you're just like, I just have to do this. And so, for example, me, like in 2020, I just started saying like, all right, acting, like I'm going to fall into it. I'm going to fall into writing. I'm going to just do it. And I don't need the permission from people and networks to follow that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's so cool about the time we live in, right? Because when I was your age, you couldn't just make a movie with your like cell phone. Like I remember when I was in college, because I went to school for broadcast journalism, to make my hosting reel, like, because I wanted to be an on-camera reporter, I had to go out with a friend who had a full camera with a VHS tape. I sound like I'm 100 years old, but I graduated in 2000. And so it's like with a mic, you know what I mean? God. And like going around, and then you have to take that and edit that, and like the process of editing that tape. So it's like now people who are in their teens or 20s who want to do this, I'm constantly like, just do it. You have no
Absolutely.
You have a phone that has everything on it that you need to make a movie. So just go and do it. So it's such a beautiful time. But yeah, it was about making that decision that I'm going to do this. And the funny thing is, I have such a supportive mom. She was never like, you have to do this, or she was always supportive. I still remember the weekend I went home and I was like, so I think I'm going to quit everything and move to Los Angeles to be an actress. And she's like, okay, like do what you want, like be happy. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's just making that decision. But I'm so excited for you. So you just started really pursuing acting in the last year?
I did. I think that we as children, we grow up as human beings, we're always sort of being these seeds are always being planted, but then sometimes it takes time to just water them and cultivate them. And I'm really grateful. Sometimes I look back on my, educational history and I'm like, what if I went to culinary school for another 4 years and graduated from Culinary Institute of America, AKA CIA, or Johnson & Wales, and, really pursued that path? Then I would not have known the surprise of life in unfolding in all these ways that are, multifaceted and that just allow me to wake up and say, okay, I choose to do this, I choose to do that, and to like live in that freedom and not in a box. I'm really grateful for that, because fear was actually the thing that held me back for 2 years from leaving my nutrition education to like pursuing the theater. And then fear kept me from that black box. I was like, I'm not going in that black box for more than an hour, because I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to show up in that space. So I only recently got to a point in my life where I have been like, this is me. This is me. And I like me.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. You're only 27. You're still a baby. As I speak in my 40s, I'm like, you're a baby. And like,
I still don't believe you're 40. I think it's a lie. It's a complete lie.
It's a complete lie. I'm actually 25. No, but I feel like it is a different time, but I'm so grateful that I'm in that space now. But honestly, like it happened in my 30s, and I would say in my late 30s, just feeling like unapologetic of who I am and in my skin and dealing with identity. And that's like a whole nother thing. Never feeling Black enough, never feeling Latinx enough, never feeling any of the things enough. Going back to you. So you do this, but now when did you write your cookbook?
Well, I feel like we're missing a whole piece of my journey here, which is my queerness.
Yeah. So let's get into that too, because
get into that. Yeah,
we want to call this Not Man Enough. And I want you to explain to me your thoughts behind that.
Okay. Where do I begin, Gracie? So from, I would say very young age, I kind of knew that I was a different kid. I felt different because I didn't like what all the other kids liked. I loved music, and I would sit and listen to Stevie Wonder or the Clark sisters and pull out the harmonies of every instrument and every vocal part, and I could literally hear it in my head when I was like 7, 8 years old. So growing up in church, like that was my platform to sort of express those talents and those gifts.
Yeah.
So I was very often called upon to like lead a song or, sing with the choir, but like make sure I'm holding it down so everybody else falls into sync. And I kind of wore that identity of, being this kid who just loves music. And that always felt safe for me in the church environment. But there was also that part of me that I was like, I know I'm not like that other boy over there. Like, I'm not like Samuel,
Yeah.
and I kind of feel different. And, I remember growing up and just kind of paying attention to the way I held my body, held space in my body. And I noticed that the way I was standing and the way that I was holding space in my body was different from the other boys. I didn't grow up playing sports. So I've always felt like very insecure in sports, but that's what all the other boys were doing.
Right.
So for me, like my comfort was I'll play double dutch with the girls, or I'll sit with the girls at lunch, and queer was not even a word.
Right.
At the time for me. It was just like, I just knew that the penalty of sin is death, as preached over the pulpit, and homosexuality is a sin. Yet I struggled and battled with that. I was like, but I feel different. Cut to like pretty much high school time was the time where I decided that I was going to open up with somebody, not my parents, but just somebody about how I was feeling. And I went to a leader in the church, and that person told me that I was going through an identity crisis.
Oh, no.
And that God was going to deliver me, but that I needed to pray and I needed to study and I needed to, stay around strong men, which was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like such bad, like just bad. So I went to another leader, and that leader opened up to me that they themselves, while they were married and in a very long relationship with a woman, had been struggling themselves.
Oh, wow.
And so that was sort of a glimmer of hope for me that, okay, maybe God can deliver me. And I was actually thinking this.
Because he stayed married and this
Yeah,
person.
well, at the time, yes.
Okay, got
it. And so that experience sort of became very unhealthy, very toxic, because I was sharing with this person and they weren't in a place where they could support me. And that's all I can say about that.
Yeah.
The relationship got very unhealthy to the point where like I was the worship leader at the church and I was directing choirs, and they personally had issues with me. And so they were like, if your hair grows any longer, because I had a big fro and I was growing my hair, I put highlights in my hair. So it was like brown and some blonde spotlights, whatever, highlights. I was told by them that if my hair grew any longer, if it got any lighter, that they would sit me down and that I would not be able to minister in the sanctuary or do anything, but I would have to come every Sunday and still be part of the ministry, just not. So I was like, okay, I think it's time for me to go. And I left broken because I felt like, wow, this is something that no one can help me with. Like, this is just something that I'm just going to have to explore my own. And coming back to not man enough, I realized that there were men in my life who sort of led lives that were, you can struggle with something, you don't have to deal with it, you just get over it and do what you're expected to do, i.e. get married, have children. And so those were examples that I was like, I never want to repeat that in my own life. I never want to be that person. I never want to represent that. That's not truth for me,
Right. How old were you when you were thinking this?
This was like 16. Yeah.
Wow, so you're pretty young. That's pretty incredible that at such a young age you had the maturity to realize that, though.
I think it was, I definitely, my brother, who's 8 years older than I, is also queer. And so I sort of watched him struggle with his identity, specifically with the church. And so it was helpful for me to have like a soundboard in him to just kind of talk through things. But at the time I still didn't open up to my parents. They
I was
still
going to
didn't
say,
know.
did you not, and you didn't go to your brother at all? Or
No.
no? Wow.
I felt honestly trapped, I
Yeah.
felt like trapped in the silence of what this other leader in the church and
Yeah.
I sort of had going on. And like, it was our private, like they're supposed to be my like helping me get through this. And like, that's not supposed to be public. And things just got very messy. It was just like a web that grew out of control. I started receiving counseling from other people at different churches, made friends with other boys at other churches who were also quote unquote struggling. And so it was just like, we are all struggling together. And so why not just like all hang out and like, let's just struggle. So it became this really unhealthy web. And I was like, this is not for me. And
Yeah.
it was hard because I really loved the music and I loved singing and I loved participating in that way. And I didn't know any other outlet at the time to express those things. And so I had to decide, do I stay? Do I go? And if I go, what do I do every Sunday? What do I do with my week? Because so much of my life was like wrapped up in that story.
Yeah. And then at what point did you fully like come out to your family and friends and stuff like that?
I would say, and it's kind of a joke, but it's true. I came out to my mother like 3 times over 3 different occasions.
Okay.
The first time, though, that I actually had that conversation was probably in 2014 because my dad, who passed when he was 53, he was passed away of cancer, and that was in 2015. Thank you. But I remember him being really at his last stage and, me coming to him and talking to him about how I felt.
Yeah.
That was easier for him to process. I think for my mother, there was a lot of confusion. For her, she felt, was I following my brother?
I was just going to ask you that because your brother was already out at this point, right? So,
well, it's interesting. My brother and I, we didn't have the open relationship we have now where like those things were talked about. So like in our family, we didn't talk about intimacy. We didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about any of that. I mean, I can count on one hand, kind of how many times I saw my mom and my dad sort of even like kissing on the lips. Like those kinds of public displays were just not part of my upbringing. So any conversation around attraction or sexuality was just always buried.
yeah.
So I didn't even feel like I had the space at that time to open up to my brother about how I felt or to ask for his guidance with that. So when I sat with my mom and I had separate conversations with mom and dad, when I sat with my mom, she was just like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And she's like, well, why would you choose that? It's so, and I was like, it's not a choice. So we had to really go
right.
to like really go back and be like, okay, like this is not a textbook easy fix. I can't just turn the switch off and on. But I will say that college was a very experimental time for me. I was dating girls at the time and I was dating different guys on campus. And it was sort of this like fluid time for me because prior to college, I never dated. I didn't know anything about dating. I didn't know anything about having a girlfriend or a boyfriend or anything like that. So that was also feeling like not man enough, not like I didn't fit in that way. And, always like relating my identity to of maleness specifically to all these other things that represent manhood. Like you play sports or you have a girlfriend or, you wear your clothes a certain way. And I just didn't fit that at all. So it was really tough. Yeah. Coming into the truth of who I am.
Wow. Okay. That was great. Thank you for sharing that. And so
you're welcome.
Now, 2021, where are you today and how are you feeling today and what are you doing today? And do you still feel that same blank or is there a new blank in your life?
No, I know. No, it's interesting you ask because I just turned 27. I feel so healthy in my soul. I just feel really good about my journey. I have a lot of peace. I feel aligned. And it's also interesting. It's like the next step is me moving to LA at 27, which is very much your story as well.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait. I define manhood differently now.
Okay.
I don't even really spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's less about what does it mean to be a man and what does it mean to be Lazarus? Like, what does that look like? What does my soul dream of and want to be and want to do? And how do I show up for that? That's the question that I ask. So now it's not, I don't live in that in between of uncertainty anymore. I've sort of owned that my identity as a queer person is different, and that's something to celebrate. That's something to be proud of, and that I also bring a unique perspective and a unique voice. And there's just so much to what I can do because I've accepted myself, and that's the starting place. So not that my journey is over, but I definitely feel just like more connected with the path. I definitely feel free.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I owe anybody an explanation.
Yeah.
I feel free in that way.
I love that. You didn't tell me yet the cookbook and how that came about.
So the cookbook.
You have so many, for someone who's only 27, you have a lot of like living, like you've done a lot of living. I love it.
I appreciate that, Gracie. Sometimes I'm just like, God, it's a lot to unpack. Truthfully, the book was like, okay, so I started a YouTube channel in my dorm room while I was in college. I was making these cooking videos, and then I was like leaving Buffalo, New York, because Tastemade, this group based in LA, like hit me up and was like, hey, come make videos with us for Snapchat. And I started doing that. And so it was sort of this back and forth, Buffalo to LA, LA to Buffalo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all through college, to the point where it was like I almost didn't graduate because there were just like, I missed so many classes. And there was but like virtual learning was not a thing at that point.
No.
So now it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, I could have zoomed in or whatever.
Totally.
There was none of that. So this was 2014, 15, right around the time that my dad was getting very ill. I was a junior in college, and I was flying back and forth, and I was doing all these amazing things. And I had like come up with the term son of a Southern chef because my dad was a chef from the South. And I was like, I feel like that's my story. That's it. And so I started running with that. And then like 6 months later, my mom called me. She said, you got to come home. It doesn't look good. So left school. It was like November. So like right before Thanksgiving and winter break, I got home and I saw my dad in the worst state I've ever seen him. And Gracie, I remembered like during that time having a lot of serious questions that I wanted to ask my dad about what it was like growing up and what it meant for him to sort of become who he was. I felt there were holes in my own journey as a man that I was still questioning. And I was like, okay, when I go home, this is my moment. This is my chance to ask Dad. When I got to the hospital, there were tubes all up and down his mouth and his nose. And he was barely responding. And so I felt a deep sense of regret. I felt like, oh my God, if I had just gotten here sooner, why didn't anybody tell me, it was this bad. And that was also like my mother's way of like protecting me and keeping the truth from me and all of that.
Yeah.
So, which I don't condone, but I think that was why she did that and why she chose to do that. I don't know. I just kind of remember feeling very stuck. I felt stuck because my school life was almost coming to an end. I was just about to be a senior and finish. Didn't know if I could do it because of what was going on. I had all these great experiences now filming and making cooking videos, and everything just felt like it was at a standstill. And then in January of 2015, he had passed away. At that moment, I talked to, counselors, and I put myself into the on-site counselor at school. Is that what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like I put myself into the therapist at school.
Yeah.
Yeah. On campus, and started talking about how I felt. with someone, which was really, really helpful for me. But Gracie, after taking about like 6 months of just like doing nothing, no more cooking videos, no more writing recipes, like just focusing on finishing school, I decided I was like, I have to do something. I'm not happy doing nothing. I have to do something with this. And I realized that graduating with a degree was not going to be my ticket to success. It was going to be me investing myself and my time into creating my own reality. So I collected all these recipes from dad. I had all these things that he made at the restaurant. I wrote them down because prior to that there was no written record of any of these recipes passed down from like his mom and her mom. And so I started writing. I started putting together all these recipes, and very naturally, I was like, I want to write a book. I want to write a cookbook, which is crazy. I was 23. I mean, it's crazy.
Wow. That's incredible. I just got chills when I heard that. That's incredible. And I want to get this cookbook. Well, actually, I just want you to cook for me.
I'm going to send it to you. When I get to LA, I will do that.
Cook for me, please. That's so beautiful. And like that you took the time and put in the effort to write these down. Like it was meant to be, you know? I feel like that happens all the time. I'm always yelling at my mom about it because she makes all these, great Dominican dishes. And I ask her like, how do I make this? And she doesn't know. She has no measurement. She just like
a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
I'm just like, write it down, figure it out so I can have it. Wow, what a beautiful thing to have. And what a way to honor your dad too.
It's a very complicated story too, because again, like, growing up feeling like I'm queer, or I am queer, and struggling with identity, yet having a dad that was this profound like hero. I mean, to the neighborhood, like everybody knew his name, and his store was like lived on the corner of the block, and so it was an anchor in the community. And just to kind of see this hero like figure in my dad, and yet personally feel like there was a hole, like there was something missing. And not that I blamed him for that, and I don't think I explored that in the book, but I think I explore it now, where I was like, wow, there were so many things that I felt I was missing, that I wanted in my dad, that I just didn't have. I didn't have that. And so, because of the crazy hours, the long hours, and the being away from home, and even feeling at a point like, he chooses his business over his family. Like just not being able to like reconcile those things as with him as a child. So learning as an adult in history and hindsight of him, how do I reconcile him as an adult, being on his path, figuring out his life, and also giving him space and having empathy for, his process.
And that our parents are just humans, just like we are, and they make mistakes, and they are not perfect either. And it's crazy when you become an adult and you realize that, and you're like, what? Like, but you're my mom or you're my dad. But yeah, I totally get it. I think we connected on that real quick in our first FaceTime about our dads, because my dad died suddenly from a car accident in his 50s, and he wasn't really around because my mom and him separated. But there was that instant feeling of like, oh, now that is gone. Like all these like conversations never had, and how you really realize in that moment, like, wow, life is so precious. Life is so short. If you do have those questions, ask them now. You don't know who's going to be here tomorrow.
Absolutely. This goes back to like identity and queerness and all of that. So I remember when the book came out, and I was having a small like party with friends, and I invited different people. Ended up being like 100 people. It was supposed to be a small thing. And I remember getting ready, and I was home with mom, and, I was just like newly exploring what it meant to like have glitter on my eyes. And I say this in love, and my mother has since like really evolved. I just want to preface this by saying that. And I only say this to hopefully bring a moment of clarity or truth for people who might be in this particular situation with their parents. But she looked at me and she said, "Do you want to be a girl?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, it's like, she's joking, right? Like that's, so she's like, "Do you want to be?" And I was like, "Why? What do you?" And she was like, "Well, are you going to go out like this?" And I was like, "Yeah."
And that's not shocking. I mean, it's, I think people, even sometimes progressive people are still trying to figure things out, and we don't know the right things to say all the time. And sometimes we say the wrong things, but especially, your mom, someone's older, someone who might be an immigrant, someone who might not have been around a lot of LGBTQ people, all these
Yes.
things. It seems like a natural thing to ask, where it doesn't seem like malicious in a sense. It just seems like
Innocent, curious.
yeah.
Yeah. And it was, but it was also just like, for me, like, wow, how do I navigate? Because this is something that I'm doing, not because I think I want to be a different gender. I'm doing, this is just how I want to express myself today. And so, like, to your point, or to your question of where am I today on my journey, I think I still have those voices in my mind somewhere that's like, oh, but that's what girls do, because
Yeah,
that's what that teacher told me about wearing my shirt around my waist, right?
absolutely.
That's kind of a little going too far. And
Yeah.
I think what people witness in me is this, like, at least this 2021, 2020 version of me
Yeah.
is this very freely expressive person who, like, wears makeup and paints his nails and all that stuff.
Right.
And it's just like, there's a journey to that. And there's a story to how I do come to do things like that and own that. But there is still a part of me that has to say, Laz, you're okay. You have nothing to prove to an elder in a church, or to a church body, or to a teacher, or to a parent, or to someone who just doesn't see the world as you see the world. You can be who you are, and it doesn't need to be defined, and it doesn't need to be explained.
And that's it right there. That definition. Everyone wants that definition. So they want to know, like, well, you're wearing makeup. What does that mean? Does that mean you're trans? Does that mean you're a drag queen? Does that mean you are, what does it mean? Is it just that you're a guy who wears makeup and likes it? Like, we all want to put people in boxes, and we want an explanation for everything. And it's so beautiful, again, that you're like, fuck that. This is me. This is what I want to be. This is who I am. And that's more than okay. That's not just okay. That's a wonderful thing to be brave enough to do that too. So I love that. And it still ties into not feeling man enough, because there is that voice that's still like, but society says you shouldn't wear
Right.
makeup, you shouldn't paint your nails, like only girls do that. It's interesting because I say this all the time on the show, that blank so often is what propels people to greatness. It's so often what makes people kind of burst out of their shell and realize, like, you know what, that voice isn't right, but that voice, having that voice is what allows me to finally become who I am and who I'm meant to be. Because if I didn't have that voice, who knows?
Right.
That's what's so interesting about the blank. Yeah.
I'm just grateful for the fact that, like, we get to make it another day and live another day and continue to explore, and that we don't always have to figure everything out. I don't mind being in that space anymore. I think that space of being uncertain used to really scare me, and I think I've learned to embrace it and to feel like that's part of my journey. That's part of the human experience. I heard Michelle Obama say this a few days ago, but she was just like, she's still in her journey, and who she was 20 years ago and who she will be in 20 years from now. And it's this whole idea of, like, when I grow up, I want to be, and I think we should never drop that question, or at least that desire within us to continue to evolve. And
Absolutely.
that's a space that I love living in now.
I love that too. I feel like I just read something like that too. Maybe it was the Michelle Obama thing, but I feel that so much. It's like what I wanted at 20 is not what I wanted now or at 40. And I feel like it won't be what I want at 60. And that's exciting to me. Like
Yes.
I think especially in this field that I've decided to devote my life to, of like acting and writing and directing, like just being a storyteller, it's like that to me is really exciting, and the evolution of that. And like I don't expect to be the same storyteller today as I will be in 10 years. And I don't expect to be the same person today as I will be in 10 years. Yeah, I think it is really freeing when you're just like, let that go, be who you are, and be
Yeah.
open to evolving to someone different.
Can we get into, though, the expectations of society, particularly around being a Black man and being a man? And I think, like, we're talking and we're having this amazing conversation about like in the next 20 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years. But the reality is that we still live in a world where we are fighting every day, even us who may be on the side of freedom here or living outside of the binaries. We're still living in a society and culture where there are these expectations. I mean, I grew up hearing things like men take out the trash.
Yeah.
Men hold the door open. Men don't cry, right? We've heard all these
Yeah.
things before. And so I think for me, I had to let go of those ideas of what it meant to be a Black man. I mean, I think I wrestled a lot with, okay, do I speak like this in this space? And then when I go to the barbershop, do I say pause every time I'm like saying
Code
something that could
switching.
be code switching, right? Or
Yeah.
like, when I get around my non-Black friends, how do I engage in that space? And then I don't want to make that person across the street, that woman across the street, feel unsafe. And so maybe let me take my hood down and maybe let me not walk so close. So I feel like, yeah, there's that space of like, I want to explore this freedom. I don't give a fuck what they think. I'm going to be me. But there's also the reality that sometimes it's not safe for me to express in my lived experience that level of freedom. I mean, I remember, and this is like, you can say what you want about this experience. I told this experience to a friend and they were just like, I probably wouldn't have done that. But I saw this, and I'm very open and I tell people they're beautiful all the time. But I saw this gentleman standing and, we were kind of like waiting for the light to change. And I looked at him and I was like, wow, he's so beautiful. Right. And it came out of my mouth.
Oh no. In New York.
In New York, Gracie.
In New York City.
New York City. So, I was not prepared for the response that I got, which was maybe, again, to justify, you can say it was merited, but let me challenge that because so the person was like, the guy was like, what'd you say? And I was like, oh shit, he heard me. Mm-hmm. So I was like, no, you're a beautiful man. Right. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to keep. He was like, yo, I'll fuck you up. And like approached me to pretty much. So part of me was like, okay, yes, learn from that experience. Like we, it's probably not safe to just do that. Right. At all. Like bad judgment, but also like me and just being my free self. Right. Like that person that we talk about and we're saying like, we should be our free selves. But that experience kind of challenged a lot in myself. And I was like, okay, how do I navigate in that space of, well, I feel okay and I feel free to say what I think.
And that was clearly about him. That was clearly about his insecurity of hearing a man tell him that he's beautiful and what that means and what the connotation behind that.
No, but that's exactly it. I mean, it's this idea that men can't affirm beauty in other men without there being this incitation of violence, or this call to defend that or to, get crazy about it. So for me, I was like, wow, this is still very, very real in Black culture. And
in, toxic masculinity, which we love to talk about, because it's such a thing. Like women tell other women they're beautiful all the time and it's not a big deal. But what if it's two men, then, oh shit, what does this mean?
Right. I mean, I texted someone recently and this person is no longer part of my life, but I had said, okay, honey, or something like that. And the person was just like, whoa, excuse me. And I was like, oh, and I felt like I needed to, because this was a new person who I just recently met. And I was like, maybe I need to explain, like, maybe they don't understand, like, okay, I'm not flirting with you. I'm queer. And I was like, and it felt, I mean, it made me tired to just like feel like I even had to go down that road
right.
to explain at this level in my life where I just don't do that anymore. It's like, I don't need to be part of your life if you don't, but I did. I extended the courtesy and the person was just like, do not text me back again. And again, it was just like this hyper masculine, toxic energy.
Yeah.
I understand, that being Black and queer and a man, is not always like an easy space to navigate, because on one hand, you love being Black. I love being Black, and I love being a man, and I love all that comes with what I feel, the man I am, right? I love who I am, but I express very differently than others. And so how do we get to a point where we can see each other, and live like cohabitat without these binaries and without this judgment and this criticism and the fear, really?
Yeah, it really comes down to fear and allowing people to be who they are and have that be separate from you and what that means to you. I think unfortunately most of the time we're thinking about ourselves, and we're thinking about, how did that person make me feel? We're not allowing that person to be who they are. Instead, we're internalizing everything that's coming out of their mouths or anything that they're expressing. How does that affect me? What does that have to do with how I feel and how they feel about me? I think we all have a lot of work to do when it comes to that. But I think at the same time, you can't dim your light for fear of how other people are going to react to you or react to your authenticity, because it's clearly authentic. I mean, it literally came out of your mouth. You literally said you're beautiful and you didn't realize it came, you know what I mean? Like it's literally just like you couldn't contain yourself. Unfortunately, that guy was uncomfortable with it. And you know what? That is his right and his prerogative. Obviously, there's stuff there he's dealing with. But at the end of the day, it's true. We're all just trying to get through life here. We're all just navigating that stuff. Yeah.
I was him at one point in my journey.
Exactly.
I was definitely him, and I didn't like that being like associated. Like there was an LGBTQ club at high school, and I was like, I don't want to be associated with that club. And it was all the dogma, and it was all the shame, and it was I don't want them to know.
Yeah.
And I would always swear up and down. I was like, I'm straight, I'm straight, I'm straight. If anybody asked me, because that's what high school kids would ask, like, are you gay? Are you straight?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah, I'm straight, but deeply inside, I was just very ashamed. I have empathy for that. And I think that with time, if we allow ourselves to evolve, that we can.
Absolutely. I agree. To wrap up our conversation, I would love to hear your poem, and I'll just let you take it away.
So this poem is called Not Man Enough. And I wrote it this morning before we chatted. Not man enough, following your unspoken rules, like a prisoner in my own mind cage. Not man enough, uncertain, second guessing, overthinking, insecure. Not man enough, alone. Not man enough, feeling scared and unsafe. Not man enough, still hustling. Not man enough, not there yet. Not man enough, not ready. Not man enough, I need space. Not man enough, I did that dumb thing again. Not man enough, failure, repeat, failure, repeat. Not man enough, I got daddy issues. I don't get along with my father. If I only knew my father, I would. Not man enough, proving myself to other men at the gym by lifting weights I can't handle, only to prove to them that I'm man enough. Not man enough, I Google search how to rub that part of your body, too ashamed that I don't know and that I'm still a virgin. Not man enough, I can't fuck you like you want me to fuck you. Not man enough, I come too fast inside you. Not man enough, brokenhearted and unforgiving. Not man enough, stuck in a rut. Not man enough, crying into a pillow at night and wearing a mask all day. Not man enough, going in circles. Not man enough, out of control. Not man enough, I have feelings too. Not man enough, I can't tell you how I truly feel because that's weakness. Not man enough, I don't like or play sports. Not man enough, I don't know. I don't know how. I never know how. Not man enough, hesitant to ask for help or admit that I need help. Not man enough, prideful. Not man enough, I like the colors pink and yellow. Blue is cool too, but why do I have to like it? Because I'm not black man enough. I can't keep up with whatever they're talking about at the barbershop. Not black man enough. I'd rather hug than dap. Not black man enough. I wear tight pants, jock straps, nail polish, dresses, and makeup for pleasure. But I like guys who sag their pants and wear do-rags, and guys that really are really clean cut, and it's all beautiful and black and beautiful to me. Not black man enough. Will I be another statistic? not black man enough? Do I say, yo, what up, my nigga? Or what's good, my G? Ways of speaking that I actually don't speak like. I'd rather say, hello, beautiful. Have a good day, honey. Or talk to you later, boo. Not man enough. I don't have a 5-year plan. Not man enough. I thought I'd be further along by now. Not man enough. Incomplete. Not man enough. Always striving, never amounting. Not man enough. Unmet expectations. Regret. Not man enough. Not man enough. Not enough. I will never be enough for you. I will never live up to your unspoken rules or unmet expectations. I can only be man enough for me, dancing to the beat of my own drum, becoming the best version of myself, and living in my truth. That's enough.
Oh my God, I love you so much. That was beautiful and such a lovely way to end this beautiful conversation. Thank you for being on the show, Laz.
Thank you, Gracie.
Thank you for listening to Not Blank Enough with me, Gracie Mercedes. You can find out more about today's guest in the show notes. Please subscribe to Not Blank Enough wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram at NotBlankEnoughPod. If you like what you hear, please also consider a rate and review. Our show today was executive produced by Gracie Mercedes and Dave Hill and produced by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Not Blank Enough is a Gumption Pictures production.